Can you see it okay? Does the screen look all right?
Yeah,
Awesome.
that looks perfect.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Alicia Young, and thank you so much for joining us for this seminar, webinar presentation, the 5 key health habits you need to have. I hope that you and your family are all doing well, and thank you for taking the time to watch this. And I'm really excited to get into this. These are some of the key things that I've shared with patients, with clients, and I think it's a great way to get your foundation of health going. And so please feel free to ask questions throughout, and I'm going to be checking periodically. And I also invite you to share what you hope to get out of today's presentation. And I'd love to hear one of the top 1 to 3 key takeaways that you get out of this presentation today. All right, so we will get started. Oh yes, and I forgot to read the rest of the slides. So I have a Doctor of Naturopathy degree, and I'm also a binge eating and recovery coach. All right. So these are the key things we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be looking at the 5 key health habits, and throughout I'm going to be making some of my favorite recommendations, whether it be books, whether it be apps, and also once again, you're welcome to ask questions throughout. And a key thing I really want to leave you with is it always starts with one thing. So whenever it comes to making changes, a key theme that I've seen through working with people and coaching people is sometimes we can be so excited to make changes in our lives that we're like, I'm going to change this and that and that and that as well. And then nothing happens because we don't really make a lot of headway on anything. So I encourage you to really focus on what is speaking to you the most and start with that one thing. And I really would love for you to share what that one thing is at the end of the presentation. So a little bit about me. So this picture that you can see on the right, this was, sorry, I think I keep hitting my screen a little bit too quickly. So the picture on the right, that was me a few years ago. I went to teach Zumba on a resort in Jamaica. And honestly, if you had known me before that, I was so shy. I would never do something like this, talking, public speaking, and just getting out there and putting myself out there. But it all started with one thing, and that was just learning more about my health and fitness. So when I was younger, when I was 16 and younger than that, I was overweight. And so I met with a dietitian, and she shared with me the importance of healthy eating for mood, mental health, and just overall life. I was a very moody teen, and so that was really something I wanted to learn more about. And so I started changing my eating habits, and then from there I learned more about becoming more physically active and just loved the way that I felt from it and wanted to learn more about helping other people with that. And so I became a fitness instructor and personal trainer, and then from there just continued in that direction. The whole thing about moodiness really led me to want to learn more about the connection between mind, body, and spirit. And so I went to study naturopathic medicine, and I'm currently a naturopathic doctor, but shortly after this video, we'll be transitioning into a new direction. But it's all been an amazing experience to learn the importance of holistic health. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, so more of that with you today. So we're going to be going through 5 key health fundamentals. And the first one we're going to be looking at is that you are what you eat. And so one of the first things that we'll be looking at in terms of that is one of the biggest things that we find in a lot of our foods, and when it comes to health and trying to make changes, sugar comes up a lot in conversation. And so if you're on the chat, I invite you to share, what is the big deal with sugar? Why is it something that we talk about? And so I'll take a moment just to see if anything pops up. Okay, so I see, oops. I don't know if that's popping up in your screen, but I'm just trying to see if I'm having any questions pop up. Okay, so I guess to yourself, if you could think to yourself, what is the big deal with sugar? What have you heard about sugar? A lot of times when I'm giving this workshop, it's typically for people who are in the process of wanting to lose weight. So that's one context. But there's also the context of mood. There's also the context of overall health. So there's a lot of reasons why sugar is a big topic of discussion. So I'm just going to take a quick peek at the chat here. I hope it's not disrupting what you're seeing on your end. Chat. Okay. Hi, Clara. Oh my gosh. I think I know this Clara that we're speaking of. Hello. Hi, Clara. And yes, Jessica. Yes, it's absolutely delicious. Yes, Cheryl, it's addictive, it's fattening, and it is huge connection to diabetes. Yes, so all right answers. Yes, okay, so perfect. I'm glad that it's not disrupting what you're seeing. Yes, so all perfect answers. Thank you for participating. So I'm going to continue to check that throughout. Awesome. Okay. So all excellent answers. Now, when it comes to sugar, in particular, there is a specific type of sugar that I want us to pay extra attention to, and that is high fructose corn syrup. So I'm not sure on the chat if you can like raise your hand, but if you've heard of this, I would love for you to raise your hand, because this is one of the ingredients that we find in highly processed foods that can be connected. Yes, Clara, and I see 2 people have raised their hands. Who else raised your hand? Yes, to those of you who raised your hand, that's great to see that you've heard of high fructose corn syrup and that it's something that we're hearing more about. So we're going to discuss this a little bit more and why it's a really key thing when it comes to sugar and overall health. So what exactly is the issue? So when it comes to food, there are many different types of sugar. And so one of the main types is called glucose, and then we have another type called fructose. Now, when it comes to food and health, when we're looking at whole foods, then we're not as concerned. But when it comes to processed foods, where we're isolating certain ingredients from these whole foods, that's where we become concerned. And so high fructose corn syrup is an ingredient that we can find in over 80% of our foods, especially if it's packaged foods. So this is why one key health habit to keep in mind is to aim to eat as much food in its whole form as you can, because then you're not as likely to be consuming these really processed, refined ingredients, for example, high fructose corn syrup. And so with high fructose corn syrup, one end of it is the fact that it's processed. So we don't have specific ingredients paired with it. For example, we don't have fiber, we don't have vitamins and minerals paired with it, as we would find if it was in a fruit form, for example, in an apple. We don't have the water, we don't have the fiber, those types of things. And there's the other end of the whole processing experience. So when we're extracting the fructose to get it's in a state of high fructose corn syrup, then we see a lot of contaminants in that process. So an example you'll find here is chloralkali is an ingredient that can be found through the processing experience. And in other words, that's a type of mercury. So it's a type of heavy metal, and heavy metal accumulation in the body can also lead to other concerns. And so with high fructose corn syrup, fructose not only results in a lower level of satiety, meaning feeling full, it also stimulates the reward system in the brain to a lesser degree than glucose. So let me break that down a little bit. So we have this idea of satiety. So when we're looking at food, for example, when it comes to managing weight, but also, for example, the context of binging, we want to make sure that we have this sense of fullness. Otherwise, we're going to keep going back for more. And also somebody, I think it was Cheryl, had mentioned that with food, with sugar, it can be very, Cheryl or Jessica mentioned, it could be very addictive, not satisfying. So we want to keep reaching for more. And we find that this happens with fructose to a higher extent than other types of sugars, especially high fructose corn syrup, because it's so processed. Also, in the brain, we have what's called our reward system. So you may have heard of chemicals in the brain called, for example, dopamine. And these are things that we feel when our brain releases these things, we feel very happy, we feel very accomplished. So this can be done through, having good experiences with people, through meditating, through exercising, through eating well and through eating foods that are wired to stimulate that part in the brain, which contributes to the addictive nature of these foods. And so with fructose, we find that when it's triggering that reward, it's not to as high of an extent as glucose. And so our body will want to reach that high level. And so that's why we're not feeling satisfied. So we continue to reach for more. And another thing, more so focused on physical health, is that high fructose corn syrup has been associated with enhanced intestinal tumor growth in mice. And although mice and humans are different animals, there are still some links between the two species. So that's where that connection is made. And so we find that increased when we're having tumors in the intestinal system, that's more linked to colorectal cancer, which is colon cancer. So this is another reason to really minimize the processed foods that are being consumed, but also especially high fructose corn syrup. And so the connection between high fructose corn syrup and, this should be saying, your liver. And so what we find is we have a whole process of digestion. When we intake food, break it down, circulate it, extract the nutrients that we need, extract the energy that we need, and then eliminate the waste. But for some reason, foods that are high in fructose bypass that circuit and go directly to the liver. And so, what happens as a result of this is it stimulates a process that we call lipogenesis. That's a fancy way of saying that it stimulates the production of fat faster than it would usually happen. And so this process is also linked to other health concerns, for example, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, fatty liver. So some of the feedback I've heard from people when talking about health is that when people are thinking of liver and liver diseases, it's commonly thought of that it's related to alcohol consumption. But it can also be related to diet as well, to the things that we're eating. For example, high fructose corn syrup, which is so easy to access. And so in fatty liver, we have a healthy liver that becomes filled with fat because of the fact that this process is quickly happening, and then this can lead to what we call liver cirrhosis. And cirrhosis just means that the functional units of our liver are becoming inflamed and they're shutting down and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, for example, detoxifying. High fructose corn syrup is also linked to type 2 diabetes. I saw that mentioned in the chat. Yes, because of that high sugar content and really not making a good connection with the insulin. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. It's connected with dementia. Sometimes dementia is called type 3 diabetes because of the relationship to sugar, and cancer. It's highly connected to cancer because with sugar, it stimulates growth of cancer cells, cancer tissue, as we saw with the intestines when looking at rats in the previous slide. So now we're going to be looking at some hormones, which are leptin and ghrelin. We have lots of different hormones. We're going to get to some sleep hormones later, but we're going to be focusing on some digestive hormones right now. And I'd like for you to associate these two pictures with these two hormones. So we have leptin, which is considered to be the starvation hormone. And so I would like for you to associate that with the happy kid on the left. So you can imagine that your leptin is at a great level when you're satisfied, you're happy, your appetite has been taken care of, and you're in the state as this happy child. Then we have ghrelin, which is the grumbling gremlin. So when our appetite is fuming and we're hungry, we get hangry, like this cat. It's like, don't mess with me, I need food right now. So you can associate leptin with happy kid on the left, ghrelin with grumpy cat on the right. And both of these hormones are related to appetite. So we're going to start with leptin, the starvation hormone. And just so that you know, when it comes to appetite and hormones work in a kind of teeter-tottering balance. So when it comes to leptin and ghrelin, when we're associating it with appetite, with ghrelin, we'll see that when our appetite increases, ghrelin increases. So increased ghrelin is related to increased appetite. With leptin, it's the opposite. So with leptin, if we have a high amount of leptin, then our appetite is going to decrease. And whereas if we have a low amount of leptin, our appetite will increase. And so that's something to keep in mind as we're going through these hormones. Responsibilities of leptin include being responsible for our food intake and how we utilize and break down our energy, so it helps to regulate that process. It also communicates to our brain what the fat store supply is. So it looks at our fat cells and looks at it and says, okay, what is the size? Are they nice and plump? Or are they getting a little bit too tiny for us to be concerned? And that's why sometimes people will find that when they're in the process of losing weight, they might find that their appetite is increasing as their body is getting to a new set point. So that's something to keep in mind as well. When leptin levels are at a happy place, it keeps our metabolism up and our appetite down to help to maintain our fat stores where they are when we're at that happy medium. Another hormone, another organ to keep in mind when it comes to digestion and weight regulation is that of the thyroid. We're not going to be talking about that here, but that's something to keep in mind. So our body is not isolated components, they all work together. So I just want to make sure I mention that very key hormone, thyroid hormones that are related to metabolism and weight regulation. Now what happens when our fat stores are too low, then this gives a trigger to leptin. And so our brain will realize that, okay, like the fat cells are too low, which means leptin is too low. So we need to slow down the metabolism so that we're not burning as many calories. We need to increase the appetite so you can be stimulated to get more nutrients, get more calories, and bring your weight up. So that's what's happening on a physiological level with the hormones. So now we're going to talk about a key thing when it comes to obesity, and this is leptin resistance. So please raise your hand if you've heard of this term before, leptin resistance in relation to obesity. And so with leptin resistance, so what we have is we have an ideal kind of communication between the hormones in the body and the tissues of the body. Resistance happens when there's miscommunication between the hormones in the body and what's going on in the brain. So typically, as we've stated before, when it comes to leptin and appetite, when leptin increases, it signals to our brain that our appetite will need to decrease because our fat stores are at a happy medium. However, what happens sometimes is in leptin resistance is that there's a miscommunication. So we have our fat cells are at a size that we like or a little bit too large for what we like. But instead of telling the brain, hey, we're good here, decrease the appetite, the brain doesn't hear the message. It's like, oh, la-di-da, I guess everything is good. And so what happens is even though like our body should be realizing that we're good and full, the brain interprets it as, I'm starving, feed me more. And so what happens is that the brain will continue to decrease the metabolism and increase the appetite because of that miscommunication, because of that resistance. And so let's go back to high fructose corn syrup because this plays a role in that process as well, as we find. We'll take a rat study example just to kind of put things into context. So there was a study done in 2008 where rats were fed, so we had two groups of rats. One group was fed the high fructose corn syrup, sorry, not high fructose corn syrup, but a diet that was high in fructose. So that's where you'll see HF for 6 months. And then the other group of rats was fed either a high fat or just a regular diet. Now, the study has more details about what the regular diet consisted of, but it wasn't high fat, nor was it high in fructose. Then, the rats were injected with leptin. So based on what we said with leptin, what would you expect to happen with those rats? So we're pumping them with leptin. So when we have an increased amount of leptin, we would expect the appetite to decrease. Now, when we looked at the rats who consumed the high fructose diets, interestingly, there was no response. So we're seeing leptin resistance happening here. Whereas the other rats who had either the high fat or the regular diet, they decreased their food intake and lost weight because there was that communication that said, oh, we're good. We don't need to be consuming anymore. So let's keep our metabolism running, but we don't need to be consuming more because we're satisfied. And then afterwards, after a period of time, that was a period of a break, all the rats were fed a high fat diet. And so the rats from the original study who were fed the high fructose diet, they actually gained more weight than the rats who consumed the high fat or regular diet. So this shows that high fructose corn syrup, the reason why we're giving it so much attention in the sugar section is because it promotes leptin resistance. And that's related to things such as obesity, such as diabetes, such as fatty liver, so many things. And so it's just one ingredient which is so widespread. So this is why I encourage you to pay attention to this, because it can have a widespread effect on your health. So now let's go back to ghrelin, the hunger hormone, the grumbling gremlin. This is released when the stomach is hungry and when your stomach's going grrr. And the key thing with this is that you can actually time it. So you can train your body to when it will stimulate the production of this to some extent. And so this is where that idea of eating regularly comes into play, because sometimes people will say, oh, I wake up really hungry, and that can be a good thing. It shows that your appetite is firing, but you can train your body so that you're not hungry all throughout the day or throughout random times of the day. So this is a hormone that can be regulated by our behaviors as well. So now I know this was a big chunk of information. I wanted to put it at the front because I feel like that's when you have the highest amount of attention. So what is the goal for you to do with this information in addition to what you naturally take out of it? The goal here is I'd like to encourage you to decrease or totally eliminate your consumption of high fructose corn syrup and look into retraining your dietary habits. So this looks at meal timing, but also looking at sustainable and satiating meals. So this includes having well-rounded meals. For example, having balanced meals that have a combination of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And then considering intermittent fasting. Now, of course, this is very general information. You may have health concerns or other reasons why this may not be of interest to you, but I want to just put it out there so that it's on your radar, because intermittent fasting can help to balance your leptin and ghrelin levels, and it can also help with insulin sensitivity. So this is extra important when it comes to blood sugar regulation, for example, with diabetes or just overall blood sugar. So intermittent fasting has been shown to help your body to be more sensitive to insulin, so that when you have that sugar in your body, your insulin is more effective at pulling out the excess or training your body to realize you don't need as much sugar and utilizing it more efficiently. There's other benefits as well with intermittent fasting, such as improved focus, immunity, and detox we'll talk about a little bit later. And so there is some information as well. So these are some of my favorite resources to tune into for more information on this topic of sugar. And I'll just mention at the bottom for the book, I Quit Sugar. I love that book, and I love the experience that the author has shared. One of my critiques of it, though, is that some of the recipes provided in the book have a lot of sugar alcohols, and that's something that I don't suggest that people consume a lot of, because it can be linked with disordered eating and just craving sugar because of that reward system and the fact that it's not true sugar. So that's my one critique of that book, but otherwise I support it, and those are some other resources that you can find more information on what we've discussed. I'm going to take a quick moment to look at the chat before we dig into the next topic. Do apples have fructose? So I think I used the example of apples. I believe they do have fructose because it's a type of sugar. That's something that we can Google. I'm hoping that it does, because fructose is commonly a fruit sugar. So what I'll say for now is I believe it does, but that's something that we can confirm afterwards. Do you have any, and thank you for asking that, because I want to make sure I'm not just saying like random stuff that's not making sense and throwing you off. Next question, Julie, Do you have any recommendations ratio for intermittent fasting? For example, is 14-10 better than 16-8? So what I'll say is it really depends, because our bodies are unique and our bodies are different. When I'm making suggestions, so once again, this is very general, and because I don't know your body inside out, I can't say for you whether, okay, great. Yes, glucose. So for the other question, apples do have fructose. Thank you for confirming that, Jessica. So now you have the answer, Cheryl. And getting back to Julie, so I can't tell you specifically because your body is unique. And so there may be factors, for example, your body type, maybe there's certain foods that you might be eating outside of the window that can be impacting how effective it is. So generally what I would say is, from what I've read, for example, from Dr. Jason Fung in that book, The Obesity Code, and some of his other work and videos, in order to get benefits, you'll start to see the benefits at 16 window of fasting and 8-hour window of eating. But that depends as well. There might be some people who are more sensitive. And for example, what comes to mind are different body types who may need to have a lengthened window, fasting window, to see those changes. Also, your body typically adapts as well. So you may start off in one eating and fasting window, but then depending on the goals you're working towards, for example, it might be body fat, like decreasing body fat percentage, your body adjusts over time. So that might mean that you may need to shift the window. And from just kind of watching people and their experiences, sometimes people find that they need to tighten that window if they want to tighten their goals. So that's just general information. So I hope that answered your question, just because I can't answer it too specifically, but that's an excellent question for sure. But the 16-8 is the common one I see the most, and I often encourage people to start with like 12-12 and then 12-14. That's like 16 hours, with 12-10, and then with the change into, or sorry, 12, yeah, you know what I mean. But with the goal of the 16-8 is like that sweet spot, and then adjusting as necessary for one's goals and then finding what works. So awesome. You're trying 16-8. That's awesome. How long have you been doing it for, if you don't mind sharing? Or is it something that you're planning to start trying? 2 days. Okay. That's great. Yes. How are you enjoying it so far? It can be, for some people it might be an adjustment. For some people it's like nothing. Yeah, it's a cool experience. Still fine. Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for sharing, Julie. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I continue because I also want to, yes, hope to maintain it, and hopefully you'll also get to know about your body as well through the process, like the shifts, and give yourself time because it can take a few weeks to adjust to it as well. All right, so we're going to jump into our next topic now. So our first health habit. So now we're going to jump into the second one. Okay, so sometimes you just need to let it out, like this constipated, cute creature that we have here. Sometimes you need to let it out, whether it be emotions, whether it be constipation, whether it be toxins, you need to let it out. So that's health habit number 2. We're going to focus right now on pooing. So if you know, in the naturopath community, like a lot of people say, joke around, like, oh, I went to see my naturopath and they talked about poo. They asked me about how often do I poo? Do I see mucus? Do I see undigested food? What's the texture? Yes, because your digestive system is a huge reflection of what's going on overall in your body, and your digestive system has its own nervous system, which is related to mood. It's called the enteric nervous system. So the digestive system is huge, and your poo communicates what's going on in there. So we have our large intestine, and what happens is it lets us know different things that may be going on. For example, we might have diarrhea, and this could be a sign of maybe there's parasites in the body, maybe there's an infection, maybe there's a food allergy and the body's trying to get rid of it. So that can be something. We might have stools that's really hard and dry. That can speak to dehydration and the fact that we need to be consuming more water. So there's healthy communication there. And so here you'll see an example of a Bristol stool chart. the reference image is Wikipedia, but the information that I'm sharing with you isn't necessarily from Wikipedia. But the picture is showing here, the goal when it comes to pooing is type 4. So this is smooth, it's like toothpaste, it's easy to pass, and that's what we consider to be normal. But then we also look at the other side, the other extremes, and try to get an understanding of what's going on in your body and how you might need to support it to help this process. Now, we did talk about the liver earlier. The liver is a powerhouse for detoxification. Liver, we also have our kidneys, our lungs, our skin. These are all detoxifying organs, but your liver is number one. And so what happens is that we have things that we take in. We take nutrients in through food, through beverages. We take things in through the air. And so we take what we need, and then sometimes toxins and contaminants are part of that process. And so the liver works to break it down and then get it out of the body. So we'll jump to that second major point first. So here we see P1 with an arrow and then intermediary and then arrow P2. What I'm communicating with you is that when it comes to detoxifying, it's a step-by-step process. So we have our first phase, and then we have a phase where the body is breaking things down into a different form so that we can essentially eliminate it. So that second phase where we're getting ready to eliminate is phase 2. And in this whole process, we have different vitamins and nutrients that are really important for each stage. A lot of these vitamins and nutrients can be found in our BEVA, can be found in foods that are in the brassica family. So these are those really powerful vegetables such as kale, such as broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts, and then also B vitamins. We have a lot of different B vitamins, and they're really important for detoxification. And so if we jump up just to that second point at the top, we see bowels and kidneys. So what's happening in that process of detoxification? The liver is helping to get ready to eliminate either waste that is from fats. So we're breaking down fats. And so the waste that's generated by fat is released through our bowels, through the poop. And then the water soluble, so the waste that can be released through water travels through the kidneys and it comes out in our urine. So it's important to know that your bowels and your kidneys are also important organs to support your liver in eliminating the toxins that can gather in your body. So different ways to optimize your detoxification is that there are detoxes that you can do. They range in time from 7, 10, or 30 days. And so one thing I want to point out is that I find that there's lots of things on the market, lots of packages, boxes, which are like detox. The thing is, it's important to be mindful of the ingredients in these detoxes because some of them are results oriented. So they have a lot of laxatives in them. So they're encouraging you to poo a lot and get rid of a lot of water. And so yes, when people have the goal of shedding some weight as part of that detox, you'll consider yourself successful because of that. But it comes at a cost because it's often getting rid of important nutrients and water and not really giving you the other things that your body may need. So that's just one thing I want to share. Other ways to optimize your detoxification include doing a water fast 24 hours, 1 day a week. So that can also be a way that you do intermittent fasting. Once again, general information, so take it into consideration with your personal health and personal preferences. We also have lemon water. So adding lemons to water, even though lemons taste sour, they actually have an alkalizing effect in the body. So that's something that helps with detox. Now, if you're going to be drinking the lemon water, aim to use a straw, preferably a glass straw, because we want to protect our environment and our fellow creatures inhabiting our planet with us. But that helps to prevent the lemon from wearing down your enamel on your teeth. Other ways to support your detox are to consume fiber. So fiber is high in foods such as beans, berries, and bran, 3 Bs. And I'm curious to hear how much fiber do you think typical adults should be consuming on a daily basis? So I'll wait for your answer. Well, please pop your answer into the chat, and I'll continue with these last 2 points before sharing the answer to that. Some other ways to optimize your detox include being mindful of the environmental pollutants that you may be getting into your body. So this comes from the air, especially if you live in a city that has a lot of air pollutants. Excuse me, and then we also have it through the things that we put on our body, like different creams and lotions, perfumes. Our skin is one of our major detox organs. That is being absorbed into our bloodstream, and then our body has to try to break it down. Sometimes our body does not know what to do with these ingredients that man has made or humans have made, these synthetic ingredients, and that then gets stored in the fat tissue, because when the body doesn't know how to break something down, a way it protects itself is to put it in the fat tissue so it doesn't wreak havoc in the rest of the body and harm the other organs. And then colonic. So this is something I'm hearing multiple kind of sides to the story of colonics. I personally haven't had one yet. That was one of my goals for 2020. Just haven't had the chance yet with what's going on. But some key things with colonics, if it's something that you aim to do, then to ensure that you go to a registered colonic hydrotherapist, so that they are trained and you can trust that they know what they're doing. Not a random person using tubes and sticking tubes up your body who's just doing it for fun. And doing a slow passive system, because the idea with a colonic is that you're going to have water passively filtering through your large intestine, through your intestinal system. Because our intestines have a lot of ridges. They have a lot of absorptive, they're really important for absorbing nutrients and gathering those nutrients. So they have a lot of ridges, and it's easy for things to get stuck. Sometimes we need to just have that physical clearance because we don't want to have, it's like stagnant water or having like mold if you have something sitting around too long and not gotten rid of. So that's what I kind of think of colon hydrotherapy as. And some recommendations that have been shared with me is to, after having a colonic done, to ensure that you're replenishing the microbiome by taking probiotics, because as we said before, the digestive system has its immune system in there as well, and it's a nervous system. And part of its magic and beauty is the different types of bacteria that are in it. But when we physically are flushing things out, we can, by extension, lose some of those healthy bacteria, so we want to replenish that. Okay, next. So did we have any answers, by the way, to the fiber question? Okay, so basically, we need to be aiming to have 20 to 25 grams of fiber a day. And a lot of people are not getting that amount. And so big recommendation is, this is something, if you want to increase the amount that you're consuming, to do it gradually, because if you increase it quickly, that can contribute to a lot of gas and discomfort and constipation. So the goal is to, have 5 grams, increase it by 5 grams every few days until you feel like it's a part of your lifestyle and your digestive system is happy with it. And it encourages you to explore different forms of food that have fiber in it as well. Okay. So now we're going to jump into number 3, our third topic. I'm just going to make sure I'm keeping on time. So I'm just going to take a quick look. All right, so we're doing good. And once again, please continue to feel free to pop in the chat if you have any questions. All right, so drink nature's perfect beverage, water. Now the body is over 70% water. So that speaks highly of how necessary it is. And that speaks to just by amount, but also it's important for so many functions in our body and movement. And I highlighted here the lymph is 94%, because the lymph system is, I feel like it's a system that doesn't get a lot of attention unless it's about the topic of cancer, because with the lymph system, it's responsible for carrying that excess fluid around our body, and that excess fluid tends to have different toxins and substances that we don't necessarily want to have in our body. And so water is so important because it helps with keeping our blood the viscosity. So we don't want it to be too thick. We want to make sure that it's able to, like the blood is able, like our blood cells are able to travel happily, smoothly. We don't want to have any congestion because that can lead to blood clots. That can lead to other things as well. So the body, water is one of our primary fundamentals when it comes to just overhauling your healthy lifestyle. So some of the things that water does is it helps to protect our organs so that we're having nutrients provided to, like, it's a system of travel. So we have water traveling and bringing nutrients to our different organs. It helps to prevent constipation, so that can prevent other things like hemorrhoids and fissures and damaged tissue, but also just helping to ensure that we are keeping things fluid as well. It helps to reduce wrinkles just by the fact that it's helping to keep our bodies hydrated. It helps to regulate our body temperature during these hot months so that we'll sweat when we go outside, and it helps to lubricate our joints to help us keep comfortable when active. It helps you feel full and satiated because of the volume that you're consuming as well. It also helps to reduce the burden felt on our livers and our kidneys because they're so important for detoxifying. Helps to flush out waste. It helps to improve our circulation, so that's when we're looking at blood flow, and especially when we're doing high intensity activity, when that demand is even higher. It helps to carry nutrients and oxygen to our cells. It helps to lubricate our mucous membrane, so like our eyes, our nose, our mouth. It helps to keep those lubricated, so they're also protected from injury as well. And yes, I'm just going to take a quick look at our question. Hot water versus cold water, which is best? So that's a great question, and a lot of answers may be it depends, because it depends what is your goal. Yeah, what is your goal? Which is best? Because sometimes one is advised versus the other. I've heard about cold water being helpful. Once again, a lot of times I'm giving this presentation for people who have the goal of weight loss. So I've read about cold water being helpful for weight loss, but I also heard about hot water, which is best. Ultimately, it comes down to what your goal is. I like to recommend warm water, or very, very warm water, because it helps with the process of digestion. I find that cold water can actually be shocking to the body sometimes, and when it comes to detoxification, oftentimes warm water is recommended to start your day. Warm water with a lemon, possibly some cayenne pepper. Keeping hydrated, but I was told cold water is harder on the body. Yes, I agree with that. I agree with the idea of cold water being harder on the body. I found that it can be shocking to the system. And part of what I learned in traditional Chinese medicine is the idea of wanting to have that balance. And so the digestive system, as an example, is a very warm environment. And so in order to help with processing nutrients, we want the incoming nutrients to be as close in temperature as the system that's going to be helping us take those nutrients and use them. And so we see a massive shock when we're bringing in this really cold temperature into this area that wants to be warm. And so instead of the energy that can be used to take those nutrients and use them, the energy is being used to change the temperature of that incoming vehicle of nutrition. So that's kind of the standpoint I usually take, because that makes a lot of sense to me. There are people who will swear by cold water. Some people prefer cold water. I tend to more recommend warm water for the reason just shared, but also because I like to recommend that people like have teas throughout the day, or warm water, because it helps to break things down, especially if, you know, sometimes you might be feeling gassy. So the water helps to break down, the warm water, the heat helps to break down the gas. But I definitely agree with that idea that the cold can be shocking or harder. And then I see Clara is sharing some fiber-rich foods. So she shared that lentils, pears, broccoli, peas are all sources of fiber-rich food. So yes, and keep doing your research and trying to expand your repertoire of foods that are high in fiber. And it's really important to get a high variety of things that you're consuming. That's where you get the benefits, because you're also getting different vitamins and minerals and different nutrient profiles. And so the value comes through the diversity. Yes, thank you all for sharing and commenting. And so with water, how much and how fast, there's a lot of different ideas out there about how much and how quickly you want to be drinking water. So the liver really only needs half a cup of water every 30 minutes to adequately process it. I remember hearing something on a radio show where, and you may have heard of this, there was a competition to drink a certain amount of water in a certain period of time. And a person happened to do that. They just drank a whole bunch. I don't remember how much and how quickly, but they had to go to the hospital because it overloaded their kidneys. And so it's important to be consuming things in a way that your body can actually handle it so you can get the most out of it and not cause harm to yourself. So the ideal pace is having half a cup of water every 30 minutes. That's one way, but getting your water in as you'll get into a rhythm with it. In terms of how much, there's many different ideas, but one of the ones that I find to be most logical is to take your weight in pounds and divide that by 2. So that number, for example, say, we'll just take a random number of 140. Divide that by 2, we get 70. So that number is the minimum to be consumed in ounces. So 70 ounces is what needs to be drinking by that person for their absolute minimum. And so 70 ounces, we have 8 ounces in a cup. So that's about 9 cups, because that's like 72 ounces, and that's the bare minimum. That's not considering things that maybe consuming that can be dehydrating you from the water you're consuming, like coffee. For every cup of coffee, I recommend drinking a cup of water just to keep balanced, because coffee can be dehydrating even though it can have some benefits. All right, and there are some suggestions to flavor it, because sometimes people, I've heard a lot that just don't like the taste of water. So there's many different ways to flavor it. So how do you typically flavor your water if you don't like to drink it plain? One way I commonly suggest is to add like lemon, so citrus fruits like lemon, limes. People like to add berries to it because it makes it look very aesthetically pleasing, and it gives it a little bit of flavor as well. I remember somebody had mentioned that they put a little tiny bit of salt in it as well, not too much, just a little bit. Some ways that I encourage you to, oh, great, we have some sharing here. Cucumber, yes, cucumber. I love that flavor, cucumber, and it smells good too. There's a lot of lotions that have that scent of the cucumber melon flavor, so adding cucumbers as well. Yes, vegetables, adding vegetables and fruits to your water. What I suggest to avoid or minimize is there are a lot of great things on the market. Well, they're advertised really well, where you squirt these substances into your water and it makes it taste delicious, at least more delicious than it might be on its own. But the thing with these is they can have artificial sweeteners, and that can also play, like we talked about, the reward system in the brain. So typically, if we have a sweet sensation, our brain is being cued to be ready for sugar to come. And so with those, because they're artificial sweeteners, it's not real sugar. And so people may often end up desiring sugar or having more sugar throughout the day, even though they didn't have any sugar in their water, just because it's hijacking the brain system. And some of the ingredients can actually be neurotoxins, so they can be toxic to the brain. I don't know if there's any migraine sufferers on this call, but I used to get really bad migraines. I get them here and there. But those types of things, neurotoxins, artificial sweeteners, things that have like sucralose, like Splenda, and all these things, these can be very distressing to the body. So these are things to watch out for. Okay, now we're going on to our 4th key habit. And here we're going to be talking about sleep. All right, so when it comes to sleep, I'm in love with these little puppies. I love this picture. Okay, so there are 2 hormones that are really important when it comes to sleep. So this is melatonin and cortisol. So I'd like for you to associate that cute puppy. Jessica and I were talking about how cute that puppy is. Associate that with melatonin. This is your winding down, getting ready to snooze and have a beautiful sleep with sweet dreams. Then we have this beautiful peacock on the right, which is bright. It's like, ready, look at me. The time is now. The sun is shining. It's time to fly. Associate this with cortisol, that get up and go hormone. Yes, he's a cutie. That puppy is such a cutie. All right, so melatonin, I'm sure that you've heard a lot of, because melatonin gets a lot of attention, and it's often mixed up with melanin, which is the pigmentation for skin, but we're talking about melatonin, the sleep hormone. And this is responsible for winding down. It's a hormone that's produced in what we call the pineal gland in our brain, and it's really sensitive to the light versus the dark. And so when it comes to melatonin, we'll see that with our hormones, they have their natural rhythm, times when they peak, and so they're really at their highest, and times when they lower. So with melatonin, it starts to creep up in the evening at around 6 p.m. and it peaks at 10. So if you wanted to know the ideal time to really get your best dosages of sleep, that would be like to be in bed by 10, by sleeping by 10, and start to wind down a few hours, or at least an hour before then, and turning down the lights and winding down, having that kind of routine. It really lowers at 6 a.m. because the hormone cortisol is peaking at 6 a.m. And during sleep, we have different types of repair taking place. So between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., we have a lot of physical repair happening. And then between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., we have mental, emotional, psychological repair. So sometimes people will find they have a certain time that they're waking up at night. They might have certain dreams. And so that's something that we explore in more detail, because in addition to, you know, the body, the brain is kind of making sense of maybe some emotional situations, or maybe there's challenging things happening in life. You're trying to make some important decisions. Your brain is working through it. It's also, your body is also detoxifying as well, so that can also be a reason why you might be waking up at a certain time, if that's happening. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And so with this hormone, it peaks at 6 a.m., ready to go, let's start the day. And then it starts to, so it has its upper peak at 6 a.m. and its lower peak at 6 p.m. And to support this hormone, it's really important to be mindful of light sources. This is especially important in the wintertime. Luckily, right now we're in the summer, so we have a lot of daylight naturally, but in the wintertime, it's really important to try to get some access to sunlight during the day, because we have such little natural light. We do what we can to regulate this process. So I just want you to think, and feel free to share in the chat box, what a typical day is like for you. Because sometimes when I work with people, I find that sometimes we want to do the best to take care of our health, and sometimes we can beat ourselves up. I'm the same way. I think that sometimes I'm like, you know, I know this information, I talk about with people all the time. How come I'm not making these appropriate decisions? Like, do better. But we're human, and we do our best, and we take what we learn and we do our best to implement it and get that support when we need it. So I encourage you to think about what a typical day is like for you. There might be days where stress hormones are high, like for example with the pandemic that we're currently going through. As we're recording this, there might be, especially at the beginning, maybe now, there could be times when we're like, we just don't know what's going on, and we're just figuring it out day by day. So there's that aspect of uncertainty. Maybe there have been decisions that have been made for you that you wouldn't want. It's not your ideal. So there can be many reasons. There could be financial sources of stress. There could be foods that you're consuming that are contributing to your stress. So there could be different things, different sources of input that could trigger that stress response. Now, with cortisol, we do want to have that cortisol. It's important, but what's important is the amount and how often it's being triggered. So what happens is if we have a lot of stress and we're not doing our part to manage it, then our ability to heal and repair becomes interrupted. And so this is where we can find that it's more common for us to get sick as our immune system weakens, or we just might not be able to tolerate certain stresses, and we get closer to our breaking point, and it takes less to trigger that breaking point, and other things as well. So, you know, this is where I find that when I talk with people who have autoimmune conditions, for example, like I have some family members with a condition called myasthenia gravis. I have a friend who also has an autoimmune disorder and or health condition, and when I look at their past, or when I look at the years leading up to those conditions, not to say that this is the cause, but I believe it contributes to the cause. They're typically living these really intense lifestyles, not getting enough sleep, very go, 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 not eating healthily, not taking time to slow down, and very high achieving, very ambitious, which are great qualities to have, but not honoring the body's need to wind down and rest in order to support that go, go, go. So this is why it's important to have that, or to prioritize that balance in your life. So yeah, I encourage you to think about what are some of your sources of stress. Are there different ways, like how do you feel about how you're managing those sources of stress? And are there, you know, Jessica and I were talking earlier about this pandemic and how it's been affecting, like we've kind of had some time to sit and reflect on things, like different companies have to sit and reflect on things and think about how they're going to be going forward. I can share that I ended a relationship that I was in for 8 years, and I just realized that there was some elements of emotional abuse in that relationship, and I was like, just having that time to see things differently, to not be so distracted and pulled into other areas of my life, helped me to see, what do I want for my future? How is this stressing me out? Is that good for my overall health? What about my goals? What do I want for myself? Is this healthy? Is it serving me? So I encourage you to really think about, you know, your day-to-day. What are some sources of stress? How are you managing it? Are there things that you need to eliminate or cut down on? Are there things you need to bring more of, like lovely sleep, going to sleep at an earlier time if that's an option? So I just encourage you to really give some thought to these things. Okay, and now we're going to get into another organ. So we have our adrenal gland. So this is known as the stress gland. And so when I saw this picture, I felt stressed because I'm like, is she really above all those trees, or is it just the effect of the camera? So that stressed me out, but she looks happy, so I'm happy for her that she's having a good time. For the adrenal gland, this gland is on top of our kidneys, and so our adrenal gland has two functional areas to it. So we have the medulla, and then we have the cortex. And so these pump out different types of hormones from the same gland. So we have adrenaline, which we've heard a lot about, that fight or flight hormone from the medulla. And then we have cortisol, which we just talked about, which is represented by that beautiful peacock of let's get up and go, but let's not overdo it at the same time. And so cortisol is important for many things. For example, it helps with our daily regulation of our hormones, and it's highly associated with the release of our sex hormones. So this includes progesterone, DHEA, estrogen, and testosterone. And it's also important for fat and carb metabolism. And so this is a key thing when working with individuals who are wanting to work on their weight loss and they're having a difficult time because they're eating well and they're doing other things correctly. Stress has a major impact. When you have this high amount of cortisol, it affects your insulin sensitivity, it affects your body's ability to shed excess fat. So it's important to really manage that stress to the best of your ability. I mentioned salivary tests here because there are different tests that can be done through looking at your saliva, and they can give you an indication of your sex hormone status, along with, you can have the test done just to look at your adrenals. So there are interesting ways to get an idea of what's going on in your body, because sometimes it matches up and sometimes it doesn't. So it's pretty interesting. So with this topic of stress and sleep, I encourage you right now to take a deep breath. I should have probably said this previously when we were talking about stress, but some key things that I, when just talking with people about stress, because I feel like a lot of us deal with it. I haven't met anybody yet who is not stressed at all. And some of the key things I've learned in life and through other people and through reading stuff is the importance of sometimes we just need to let the little things slide, and from little for you. Sorry, I see that my internet went unstable for a moment, but little just respecting as well that little for me might be different from little for you, might be different from little for like Jessica, for Clara, and for Cheryl. So it may be different for everybody, but getting to know yourself and seeing things for what they are, and trying to have that perspective. A big thing I always like to share is to practice gratitude and joy. When I went into naturopathic medicine, I experienced anxiety and depression because I was very perfectionistic, and I found the training to be challenging, as it should be. It's a very, having a high level of responsibility in the role. But I found that I was really stressing out, and it really was affecting my mood. And so I got to see a social worker, and she put me into a program where I could meet with other people. And we had a stress, anxiety, depression group. And one of the things I learned there is the importance of gratitude. And so from that time, I think it's been over 5 years now, we had this activity of writing, being grateful, writing down 5 to 10 things you're grateful for every day. And I encourage you to do that. Like for me, when I did it, I was like, it really shifted my perspective on things. And there used to be things that I would get upset over, but now I'm like, look at all the things I have to be grateful for. And all those things, those negative things that happened, at some point things turned around. So it's not like I was in those rough patches forever. So it really helps to shift your perspective and train your mind to look for the positive. It can take some time for your brain to really shift in that direction, but I think it's a very worthwhile activity. And I'll share that sometimes if I'm feeling down, I pull out that gratitude journal and I just flip to a random page and look at, wow, this day, look at all the things to be grateful for. So it's a free activity that I really encourage you to take on. Now with sleep hygiene, these are just some important points for just the basics of when it comes to sleep hygiene. So when it comes to winding down, to really supporting that melatonin process, take at least 1 hour to wind down, and have a firm mattress. Oh, sorry, with the winding down, just to elaborate on that, winding down means taking some time for yourself to relax and tune in with yourself. So this can be like reading a book, this can be journaling, this can be talking with somebody who's close to you, having a relaxing conversation, checking in. In terms of the mechanics, having a firm mattress with a comfortable pillow, these are important. Having a quiet, dark room, because we want to have the darkness to stimulate the production of melatonin. If we have these bright lights around us, our brain registers that as it being bright in the day. So we want it to realize that it's dark in the night. And minimize electronics. So that means getting rid of the screens from your bedroom, from your bed. So that includes phones, that includes tablets. Some people like to use e-book readers. I still use that. But just these things that have the bright blue light, we want to get rid of those at least an hour before bed. And really ensuring that you're isolating the room for its purpose. So keeping the bed for relaxation, for sleep, for sex, and not for things like doing work, not for things like catching up on emails or getting into a heated text debate. Sleep, it takes time to wind down, support that natural process. So do you remember these 2 hormones? On our left, we have leptin, which is our starvation hormone. And then we have on the right, GHRELIN, so the grumbling gremlin. And so this is when we just really, really need to eat. So I want to talk a little bit about the interplay between leptin, ghrelin, and then the hormone insulin. We didn't really talk about insulin, but insulin is important when it comes to regulating blood sugar. So our blood likes to have a certain amount of sugar in it, and if we have too much, the body does not like that. And what happens with insulin is when we eat different foods, they trigger a different response in terms of how much glucose is flooding into the bloodstream. When we have more glucose flooding into the bloodstream, that stimulates and triggers more insulin. We typically don't want this because this can wear out the pancreas. The pancreas is what produces the insulin. So with insulin, so this is related to blood sugar and regulating blood sugar. When it comes to lacking sleep, that affects our hormones. So what happens is when we're not sleeping well or not getting quality sleep, it will decrease our leptin. So when our leptin decreases, our appetite increases. Also, our ghrelin increases. So when our ghrelin increases, our appetite also increases. So we won't feel satiated and we'll want to eat more because of not having enough sleep. And that puts us into a cycle of not sleeping well, leading to more overeating, leading to more weight gain, leading to wanting to have more sugar and sugar and sugar and sugar. So it's really important to prioritize sleep for many reasons. Also, the hormones have their own circadian rhythm. There are times, like we talked about, the cortisol and melatonin, they have their ideal peak time. So we want to respect that and support that. And when it comes to insulin, it's less sensitive, so it's less active during the evening. So this is why if you're having foods that tend to be, will need the insulin to break it down, it's better to have it earlier in the day when your insulin power tends to be stronger. But overall, we want to eat foods that are low to medium glycemic and not stimulating a high response of pouring insulin into the bloodstream. So these are some of my favorite books and resources that I'd like to recommend. So we have Red Light Bulbs. These are for helping with your room and your environment so that when you're getting ready to wind down, it's not so bright, and so you can start to get ready to stimulate that melatonin production. Yellow glasses, so if you do a lot of computer work, you can use those glasses to help with the blue light that's being filtered into your retina in your eyes. One of my favorite programs is called F.Lux. So this is a free program you can download onto your laptop, and what it does is it finds your time zone and it changes the lighting on your screen in coordination with your time zone, so it will automatically dim it. And somebody told me that iPhones have this automatically built in. I have an Android, so I downloaded an app called Twilight, and so it does a similar thing. In terms of apps, there are many out there, but things like Calm and Headspace, these apps help with meditation, and they have different programs you can use for helping with meditating, but also with helping with your sleep. Some of my favorite books are, one is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It talks about stress and how it relates to our current lifestyle, how in the past we have high levels of stress and then long levels of calm. And if there was a stressful event, we'd pump our stressful energy, our fight or flight into that event and then let it go. But oftentimes in our lifestyle now, we have all these moments throughout the day that are high stress or chronic low stress. And so that can lead to so many different concerns in our body, such as ulcers. And then the next one is Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn. I love that book. It just talks about managing stress, managing chronic pain, managing mood, with the key resource being meditation, and how meditation affects your perspective of life and how you manage just what you're dealing with. So those are my top 2 recommendations. And lastly, we have Move Your Body. So this is going to be a tiny section, because often I talk about this at gyms, and usually they give a whole bunch of training about moving your body, but just want to talk about the importance of moving your body, and would like to know what are different ways that you've been moving your body, and how have you been creative during this time? Like, have you been finding that you've been able to be physically active during this time? And if so, what are the different things that you've been doing? Like, have you tried anything new? I'm also interested in knowing, is there anybody on the call who is like a really big gym goer? Because I know that there have been some changes with the gym as well, just with what's going on. So I'm curious to hear from you. Have you been able to move your body over the last few months? Have you started? Have you stopped? What's been going on in terms of your physical health and all that? So I'll let you jump in when you have a moment. Some of the key things when it comes to just body overall of when looking at what things to track when it comes to looking at having a healthy weight. Once again, very general, because there's lots of factors here. But I often recommend that the key starting points to look at include your body composition. So this is, what is the relationship between your lean muscle, your lean body tissue versus your fat body tissue? Because oftentimes, maybe not so much anymore, but there's been the recommendation of tracking your weight, which is, it can be good. Sometimes, like, I focus on helping people who are managing binge eating. And so with managing that eating, that view of food in relationship to food, we often don't focus on the weight side of things until we have a better standing on ground. But it's often, sometimes people use monitoring weight as a way to track and help them stay accountable to their habits throughout the day. I'm for that, but when it becomes obsessive, that's when I start to get concerned. With the weight, our bodies are different, and so it's composed a certain way. So with looking at weight, you're only looking at one part of the picture. Body composition helps to know how is your weight kind of balanced in your body. So when looking at body composition, you can take it by looking at your measurements. So, excuse me, so this includes taking the measurements of the bust, so the chest, the waist, the hips, also like the arm circumference, the thigh circumference. So that gives you an idea of how your weight is distributed. And then there's different body composition machines where they are called bioimpedance analysis machines. So just fancy way of saying they send an electrical circuit through your body. It's a safe machine, but with it, you have some tissues that will have a reaction to that electrical current, and then tissues that won't. So with that, you'll be able to see how much of your tissue, through a calculation, you'll be able to see how much of your tissue is lean muscle versus how much of it is fat. And then from there, you can see your body composition, and you can get a better picture than you would get just by looking at a number without having any context. I often also talk about BMI. I'm not sure why I don't have it on this slide, but with BMI, it's typically a measurement that's been given in the medical community to put people into different categories. And so these different ranges, which can range from extremely underweight to extremely obese, these are more so for relating it to possible diseases that may come down the line. But the thing is with BMI, it doesn't look at certain things like body composition. So you might have really, really lean athletes who they're in the range of extremely obese just because they have a whole bunch of lean muscle tissue. So it's really important to know what you're using to measure and the context that it's being measured in. Some of my favorite fitness apps include MyFitnessPal and See How You Eat Coach. These are more for tracking and giving recipe ideas. And then Noom is just an all-around kind of health platform to teach you about your health and aspects of your health along with tracking. One of my favorite books when it comes to when people want to lose weight or have healthy fat loss is Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle by Tom Venuto. It's one of my favorite books, and I find a lot of the information to have been helpful when I'm working with clients. All right, so I'll wrap up here and then there'll be time for questions. So thank you so much for tuning in and for your questions. So if you have any questions for me, if you want to reach me, you can find me at support@aliciayoung.com. You can also find me at www.aliciayoung.com. That's my phone number there. And I have certain social media handles right now because I am making a transition from being a naturopathic doctor, transitioning into coaching. And so these are my current social media models, social media handles, but I'm actually going to be changing them next week. So if you'd like to follow me, I encourage you to join me there and I'll keep you updated there. Right now I'm doing a series on sugar addiction, so that might be of something of interest to you. And also, just for what's going on in my world, I'm currently working on creating a beta program for a 12-week program that I'm going to be offering for individuals who are working through binge eating recovery. So if this is something of interest to you, or if you know anybody who may be interested, I definitely feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to share more information with you. So with that being said, I will jump back to the comments and see what comments we have. If there's any questions, I'm just gonna have the screen pop down. Okay. Oh, start and stopped. Okay, let's get back. So how does one manage, so this is from Clara, how does one manage waking up too early when we go to bed early? Okay, so this is where there can be, oh, hi, Jessica. So this is where we can, there can be different things that are happening here. So some of the kind of general things that pop out are looking at certain things that are being consumed. So if there's caffeine being consumed too late in the day, that can lead to waking up in the night, we're waking up too early. There's also, if there's drinking or eating too late in the day, that can also affect waking up just by needing to go to the washroom or by the different ingredients that can lead a person to wake up, especially if it's an unfamiliar meal or beverage. There is also, sometimes it can be related to hormones. So if people are having a shift in their hormones during different transitions in life, for example, a big one that comes to mind is perimenopause or menopause. People can find that sometimes they might wake up in the night as they make that shift. A key thing I recommend is trying to have as steady of a wake and sleep cycle as possible. So you maintain that 7 days a week as much as you can. And if you're not going to bed and waking up at the same time, if you're shifting away from that, then no more than an hour if you can. But if you're shifting and just life happens, just try to get back into that routine as quickly as you can. Also, in terms of managing, there might be some supplements and things that can help. Of course, I can't recommend anything because I'm speaking from a general standpoint, but there are different supplements that can be used to help to regulate the sleeping cycle and different aspects of quality of sleep and staying asleep. So it all comes down to what are the different reasons that you may be waking up and tracking that cycle to see if there's any patterns there. Okay, Jessica, I played roller derby up until COVID, trying to skate outside, but no gym time for me. I can already tell I've slowed down for sure. Yes, I feel you. That would be quite a difference, especially if that's something that you're doing regularly and you're in these places like the roller derby with other people, like, or in the avenue, but trying to skate outside. So good for you. Good for you for taking advantage of the nice weather and keeping active, because sometimes it can be hard when things are just not as we're used to them being. And Cheryl shares just walks or doing walks around the neighborhood. That's great. That's excellent. And you know, to go for a walk, it's free. So it's nice. And then you can like listen to audiobooks, you can listen to music, or you can just listen to your thoughts and listen to your environment. So excellent. Keep it up. And Julie says, I practice and teach yoga, vinyasa flow, and power. Oh, that's excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. We need more of that, especially with managing stress and just, you know, having a beautiful way to move your body, move the lymph, but it doesn't always need to be intense to be something that's beneficial. So that's excellent to hear. Claire, I see that you mentioned that it started and stopped. I'm not sure exactly when in the presentation that was, but please let me know if you had any particular questions from that. I'm hoping that it might be in the replay. I'm not sure where that happened. Cheryl, what is your recommendation for sweetening tea? Sugar, honey, agave, Splenda, or something else? Okay, so I love this question. So my answer might change based on new knowledge that comes about, but I would say I would take agave out of there just because there was something I learned. I can't remember the specific detail, but it's kind of up there with high fructose corn syrup. And something to consider is glycemic index. So this is basically when you consume something, how much sugar does it pump into your body and how quickly after consuming it? So is it quick and does it bring your blood sugar up quickly? Because when it goes up fast, it comes down fast. And then that's when you desire more sweets. That's when you're tired and sluggish. So in a nutshell, I'd say if you're going to use a sweetening agent, use it sparingly. Out of these options with the sugar, I'm curious to know what kind, like white sugar, brown sugar. My favorite is maple syrup or honey. There's a certain kind of honey and it's slipping my mind. It goes through a certain, what's it called again? Unpasteurized honey, because pasteurized is extremely processed and you're basically losing the beneficial aspects of it, like the antimicrobial properties, antibacterial properties. With Splenda, I definitely say no to Splenda because it's artificial sweetener, and that goes back to the fact that when you consume this, your body is getting geared up for sugar. It's like, where's the sugar? Where's, like you said, you're going to give me sugar. So it just messes with the reward system in the brain, and then it has your body craving sugar even though you technically didn't have any. But all in all, I'd say go for real food, real sources of sugar, and use it sparingly, because sugar at the end of the day is still sugar. And then, oh, I think with the gym started and stopped. Oh, my bad. Okay, I thought that it meant, I thought that the video stopped. Okay, thank you for clarifying, Jessica. Okay, yes, Clara, if you are who I think you are, I remember meeting you, if you're the person I think you are, and so you were doing that event, so I can understand. Sometimes you have, you know, that group of people that you're doing something with, and it can be hard to, you know, get into that swing of things when you don't have that same environment. But perhaps there are some suggestions that you can take that other people have been doing. Maybe try to implement them, like maybe going for walks, or maybe trying to do some movement in your home. But I hear you, like it can be hard when you're getting into a routine and then it just stops like that. And then the last two questions I see here, would you recommend shifting to organic food? So this is a whole, thank you, Julie, this is a whole other topic. I would say it depends. What I will say is to consider the clean 13, the dirty dozen. So when it comes to organic, it's mainly because we're looking at the quality of food and how it's grown, and also the pesticide residue that may be on foods, because that can be a form of contamination, which can add to toxins building up in our body. I wouldn't say that, or if your budget allows, then yeah, go for organic all the way, while also looking at the different definitions of organic, because some words in the health and wellness industry are hot words, but they don't necessarily do what they say, or they don't offer the benefit. So make sure that it's to the level of definition of organic as what you're thinking it is. And you can do a Google search for definitions of organic in the different levels. But a starting point I always suggest is to look at the clean 13, the clean 15, and a dirty dozen. So this is for fruits and vegetables, and it lets you know which fruits and vegetables in the dirty dozen, is updated every year, tend to have the highest amount of pesticide residue. These are the ones that I think it's worthwhile to get organic, and if not, then the other vegetables, the clean 15, if you're monitoring things, then you can slide with not getting those ones organic, because you can just focus on cleaning them really well. So the ones that typically tend to rank high on the list of the dirty dozen are fruits and vegetables that have thin skins, so the pesticides can go into it very easily. They might be berries, so it's easy for pesticides to get stuck in the berries. When it comes to the clean 15, these are often fruits and vegetables that have a lot of layers. So you can remove those layers, which tend to have the pesticides in them. They tend to be very thick skinned, like avocados, they have a thick skin. So you can cut that off and then get to the fruit or vegetable inside. So that would be that. And then there's also a similar one for fish. I would suggest looking at the Environmental Working Group's website, ewg.org. They have more information about clean 15, dirty dozen. Also, when it comes to meat, which ones are best to get organic versus not. Well, actually, meats, when it comes to meats, typically you want to have organic, just because they can contain, they are what they eat. And then fish, because some fish are higher in heavy metals than others, and there are also recommendations for how much of certain fish to consume, depending on your age, your sex, and other factors. Okay, and I see some questions pouring in, so I'm going to do my best to get through them. What about raw sugar? I'd say sugar is still sugar. Raw sugar, yeah, like they can have slightly more benefits than other sugars. Like raw, I would go for that because it's not as processed. But at the end of the day, it's no excuse to just have a whole bunch of it, because sugar is still sugar. But when you're looking at the options, I would choose that definitely over something that's more processed. But I would still look at the amount that's being consumed. And then Clara, so thanks for that, for elaborating, Cheryl. And then Clara, yes, walking a lot now. Okay, great. So you're getting some movement in. Thank you, Jessica, for clarifying that. And Cheryl asked, best way of cleaning fruits and vegetables. My easy go-to is to take some white vinegar, like a quarter cup, into a bowl of warm water, and then soaking vegetables. I do that for my smoothies. Like I soak the vegetables in there for a period of time, longer now, just because of what's going on in the world. And then like wiping it down, like rinsing it off and scrubbing it off. There are some other suggestions out there, but the key thing is using an agent that will help to get rid of residue. So I find white vinegar is accessible. White vinegar or apple cider vinegar is accessible and easy to use, and you can use it for other things too. Okay, thank you so much. You're awesome and so knowledgeable. I really appreciate your, oh, thank you, Julie. Thank you for coming and thank you for participating. It's like, it's different when you're talking to a screen. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't see your faces. But when you're talking on the chat, it helps. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, you're here. You're listening, you're engaging. So it's been wonderful for me. Thank you so much for this experience. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you've taken at least one thing away from this, and I hope that you implement it right away. Thank you. Thank you, Clara.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us and giving us all of that information. You're a wealth of knowledge, and it's amazing to hear all the positive things that you've done, as well as just everything that we can do to help maximize the wellness in our life, which right now is something that we should all think about. So huge thank you. I am going to stop the recording now, but if you have questions, you can stick around and let us know if you have any questions. Again, huge thank you to coming out and helping us learn more about ourselves and how we can work towards bettering ourselves with our wellness. And if you're watching later on, please get in contact. If you do have any questions, you can check out all the social media links. We will make sure that we link them in the description below as well. But have a great night.
Bye.